Today we are building a $400 gaming PC that can run pretty much any game at 60 plus FPS. I wanted to make this build very repeatable, so I focused on parts you can get new from the store. It turned out to be a great budget PC for summer, so hit the like button and let's start. Let's start with the CPU. I think a cheap and at the same time decent enough CPU you can get right now is a Ryzen 5 4500. It costs $77 new, and for that price you get 6 cores, 12 threads, 3.6 GHz frequency with a boost up to 4.1 GHz and 8 MB of L3 cache. Not a very impressive specs these days, but considering the price it's pretty good. Plus it comes with the AMD stock cooler, which has enough cooling capacity for our CPU. This CPU has pins, so let's install it in the motherboard right away. For the motherboard I went with the ASRock B450M that I found on Amazon for $60. In the box we have an I/O shield, SSD screw, papers with a CD, 2 SATA cables and the motherboard itself. It's a very simple but well built motherboard that has everything we need for this build. The M.2 Gen 3 slot for the SSD, PCIe Gen 3 for our GPU and 2 RAM slots. On the back the motherboard has a pretty nice set of ports, but you can see we don't have Wi-Fi. I usually don't go with a motherboard without built-in Wi-Fi, but for the $60 price it's hard to pass on this one. So the optimal thing to do here is to get a USB Wi-Fi adapter. CPU installation was pretty smooth. I then removed the stock brackets and screwed the AMD cooler. Looks good. Next we need RAM. I usually go with the RAM kits from Silicon Power or Team Group, but for this video I decided to try something new. Spoiler, it wasn't a good idea, so I picked up a 16GB 3200 MHz kit from Timetech. The price is pretty competitive and the specs are good as well. I installed them in the slots and I gotta say it looks really nice with the black radiators. Moving on to storage, our build supports up to Gen 3 M.2 SSD, which is not as fast as Gen 4 SSD, but I would say in games it doesn't make a big difference. So I got this 512GB SSD from the Team Group for $37. With 512GB you can download games left and right, but it will be enough for most users. M.2 SSD installation is very simple, just one screw and it's done. The motherboard is now ready to go in the case. After browsing through many cases, I decided to go with the Cooler Master Q300L. It is a budget micro ATX case that costs $40 and it's pretty much always available on Amazon, which is a nice plus. The case itself feels good quality. From the main features we have a glass side panel, 3-pin 112mm rear fan and magnetic dust filters with abstract rhombus design which create the looks. From the cons, the side panel is acrylic glass, not tempered, so it's easy to get it scratched. Other than that, I think it's a very nice case to build in. Inside the case you'll find a bag with all the screws you need for the build. I installed the I/O shield, some extra standoffs and the motherboard itself. Looks pretty good, and of course the rear fan's cable goes into the motherboard. Now we need to install a power supply. For the power supply I went with the Thermaltake Smart 500W PSU. I worked with many of them and never had any problems. For the $40 budget, I would say it's a very reasonable choice, and 500 watts will be more than enough for our build. With this case, you'll have to first screw the bracket on the PSU and then install it in the case. After that, I rerouted all the cables from the back and powered the motherboard. CPU, 24 pins, and I also connected the front I/O. Finally, it's time for the GPU. After looking through all available options, I went with the Radeon RX 580 2048 SP. It cost me $94 and I think in terms of performance it's hard to find something better for the price. Visually the GPU looks very solid, the backplate is made of metal so it has some weight to it, and overall the build quality feels good. This is a PCIe 3.0 card, it supports DirectX 12 and has 8GB of GDDR5 memory. Performance wise it stands between RX 570 and RX 580, which is not bad considering the price. PC is now ready for the first boot, and unlike my other videos, here it didn't start right away. After a quick diagnostic, I figured out the issue was with the RAM. The PC wasn't booting with the second stick. I almost thought it's faulty, but it worked well on another PC. Long story short, I think I got unlucky with the motherboard and RAM compatibility. So I just used the RAM kit from Team Group and it worked right away without any problems. After installing the Windows system, all the updates and AMD drivers, everything is recognized our Ryzen 5 4500, 16GB of RAM on 3200 MHz, 512GB SSD, here's the Crystal Disk benchmark, and the RX 580 2048 SP with 8GB of VRAM. In 3D Mark, PC scored almost 4200 points, which is not bad. During the benchmark, the CPU stayed under 52 and GPU under 70 degrees for the most part. Let's now move to the games. Starting with the low demanding online games, in CS2 with other set high settings, I'm getting stable around 100 FPS most of the time. Let's change settings to low, aka competitive, and now the FPS in the 150s most of the time and the frame time is also much better. Raising the bar, in Apex Legends on high settings, I see FPS in the range from 70 to 100 depending on location. I then switched to a competitive settings and got the range from 120 to 160. The game runs very well without any freezes. Moving to Fortnite, I first decided to test the auto settings, which are DirectX 12, 72% 3D, high textures, and with that I'm getting 60 to 80 FPS range. I saw some micro freezes from time to time, but they completely disappear after a while, so the game runs well. I then switched to performance mode and got 120 to 180 FPS range. You can see the game runs smoothly and the GPU at 100% load all the time. Let's check PUBG as well, and here with the high settings, native Full HD, I was getting around 50 in the sky, but when on the ground I got 60 to 80 FPS range. Frame time graph looks good and I even won the match, so we're gonna move on. In the finals, on low settings, native 1080p, I'm getting around 70 FPS. Frame time is not perfect for such a competitive game, but it's playable. Moving to Call of Duty Warzone, I decided to go with a minimum preset, native 1080p, and with these settings I got a good looking image with a frame rate in the range from 70 to 80 most of the time. As you can see, this gaming PC can easily run popular online games at playable 60 plus FPS with its raw performance without using any upscaling, which is actually great for a $100 GPU. Let's now move to more demanding single player games. In Elden Ring with the high settings, I got FPS in around 55s most of the time. It does drop to low 50s in the loaded scenes, but overall the game feels pretty good. Moving to God of War, with low settings and FSR in quality mode, I'm getting stable around 65 FPS. This game is pretty CPU intensive, but despite that, our CPU is doing great. The temperature is also staying under 71 degrees, which is far from critical. I tested Days Gone as well, and with high settings, native 1080p, I got pretty playable around 60 FPS. In Cyberpunk, with low preset and FSR in quality mode, I got 57 average FPS in the benchmark. In the game itself, I set FSR in balanced mode and got very playable 60 plus FPS most of the time. So I think this gaming PC showed a good performance for the price. I had a great time gaming on it, and if you want to build a budget gaming PC, that might be the way to go. Let me know what you think about this PC in the comments, hit the like button to help with the algorithm, and I'll see you in the next video.